Welcome back to CEEN Caribbean News. Time now for Indepth. Since the May 2015 elections, to say the occurrences in Guyana have been dramatic would not be an overstatement. The new government was met with fierce opposition from the previous administration turned opposition, the People's Progressive Party, which had been in power for over 2 decades. The PPPC continues to protest the election results, and at this time, they are yet to make a decision on whether they will go to Parliament as Guyana's opposition. In addition to that drama, Venezuela has released a decree claiming a portion of Guyana's territory in what is purported to be an attempt to block Guyana's access to the oil resources discovered by ExxonMobil in the Stabroek block of Essequibo. To discuss these issues, we have been joined by veteran journalist and editor of Stabroek News in Guyana, Mr. Anand Prasad. Welcome to Indepth, Mr. Prasad.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Now, the PPPC promised to boycott the first session of the 11th sitting of Parliament on Wednesday. Did they follow through on that promise?
Yes, they were not present. Their 32 seats in Parliament were empty, and but the government proceeded as it is able to do in their absence, and the first session of Parliament was held.
What position does the National Assembly find itself in at this time as it operates without an opposition?
Well, essentially it will continue as is until the PPP decides what it's going to do, but it will then proceed with the various tasks ahead, preparations for the budget and various other things, a legislative agenda which was outlined by President Granger and various other things. So it should be a fairly busy session.
Now, GCOM had passed its deadline to publish and gazette the election results, claiming to be waiting on the list of MPs from the PPPC. Have they made any attempts to formalize the result of the elections, given that the opposition-elect has stated they may not sit in the House?
Yes, the results were formalized. They were gazetted because there's a facility that first allows GCOM to extend the time necessary for the gazetting. So it did extend the time for the submission of the various names from the two parties. It did then receive from the governing party the list of their MPs, and those names, together with the results, were gazetted. So as far as we go, the whole thing has actually been formalized, and the only thing that's waiting for at some stage would be the names of the PPP, and they can still do that at some point, and those names will then be gazetted in addition to the ones that have already been done.
Has GCOM or the government indicated whether there will be attempts to force the PPPC's hand to take up its role in Parliament, or at least for now released its list of MPs?
Well, there's a public clamor for the PPP to take up its seats, because really they are completely isolated. There's no group that has taken their side in terms of their complaints about the elections. But of course they can sit out Parliament. That's happened here before, where for long periods, opposition parties have sat out of Parliament and protested various things. So they can very well sit out and decide to play a spoiler role. That can very well happen. But, you know, the thinking is that at some point they'll have to come around to the conventional wisdom that they have to represent 200,000 people who voted for them. And interestingly, this week, one of their younger MPs in the last Parliament issued an email to the rest of the executive saying, you know, the best option here is for us to go back into Parliament, represent our people, continue to protest the results of the elections, but just make sure that we are properly representing the people who voted for us.
What do you think will happen if the PPPC decides to stay away from Parliament? Do you think the APNU administration is likely to call a first set of elections?
Well, essentially, this is a five-year government, in the sense that there's nothing that will stop it from continuing, and there's no opportunity of the government collapsing without the PPP being present. The PPP can continue to try to play spoiler, but of course it will sour the atmosphere, and you know, there's a great need at this point for reaching out by both sides to each other and for some sort of national compromise to be worked out, because clearly the results of the election showed that, you know, the country is deeply divided, almost split down the middle, and half voted for the government and the other half didn't. So that sort of division is just not good enough for you know, a move forward, particularly in light of, you know, you mentioned in the introduction the recent attempt by Venezuela. Really, what is required here is some sort of national coming together and consensus on the way forward to the country, and, you know, all groups hope that the PPP sees the wisdom in taking that course of action.
What is the populace saying about the situation?
Pardon me?
What is the populace in Guyana saying about this ongoing situation with the government and the opposition?
Well, I think basically in terms of the Venezuelan issues and the concerns about the deep divide in Parliament, I think both sides, their supporters, want to see some sort of concerted action to make sure that the economy can move ahead, and also that a common position could be taken on this Venezuelan decree, which of course has upset a large part of the public and created concerns about whether or not we'll be able to explore for oil in this area where perhaps the most promising strike was found in the decades that we've been searching.
Now, as you mentioned, along with the opposition situation, the Guyana now has its hands full dealing with the developing row with Venezuela over territory. Now, Guyana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs had noted that it will be taking the matter to the international community for resolution. Has there been any attempts to do so?
Well, I think they are speaking to various groups. They've spoken to the Commonwealth. They are speaking to CARICOM. Of course, CARICOM would be the first port of call, and there is a CARICOM meeting that's coming up in July. And I think clearly the Guyana government would want to make sure that CARICOM is fully behind it in terms of asserting its rights in that area. Of course, there is that special concern that Venezuela is providing a lot of support to some members of CARICOM, and that could in time weaken bonds and make it more difficult for Guyana to assert its position. But Guyana has also signaled that it's going to be going to the UN and it's going to be going to the Organization of American States, and it may very well push for a different type of approach to the long-standing controversy that we've had with Venezuela, some sort of judicial settlement as opposed to simply having the good offices process, which is done under the auspices of the UN Secretary General.
President Maduro of Venezuela has accused ExxonMobil of influencing President Granger's decision on the matter. Has Exxon responded to that allegation?
No, Exxon has left it essentially in the hands of the Guyana government. It is pointed out that its arrangement is with the Guyana government, and it has absolutely nothing to do with Venezuela. But this is typical of the Venezuelan administration. I think clearly in this case here, they have gone way out of even normal considerations to claim that the drill zone for this rig is in their area of influence. It is not. It is far outside any possible and conceivable area that they may at any point lay claim to. This is essentially an attempt by Venezuela to deny Guyana access to the possibility of becoming an oil-producing state. So it's totally to drive away any ability for that to happen, and of course to scare off other investors who might be interested now that there is a potential oil strike there in investing in that area. So it's simply saber-rattling by Venezuela, simply to deny Guyana the opportunity of finding oil.
Has either Guyana or Venezuela expressed willingness to meet without international intervention to seek a resolution to the row?
Well, given the state of our relations with Venezuela over the controversy, we have had a well-established mechanism for dealing with this. So it is bilateral under the Geneva Agreement of 1966. So we don't go very far out of that, because that is really the bedrock of how we deal with each other on this issue. So we are hardly likely to go on either side far beyond where we feel very comfortable with. That said, there are a number of options that are available under the Geneva Agreement that we will now begin to explore outside of the mechanism that has been in place for the last 25 years. But all of this is happening under the Geneva Agreement of 1966, which sets out a menu of measures to be applied in a case like this.
Thank you very much for speaking with us, Mr. Prasad.
Well, thank you for having me.
That was Anand Prasad, veteran journalist and editor of Starbuck News in Guyana.